This program is brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. From 1966 till 1989, Botswana was the fastest growing economy in the world, building itself from abject poverty to middle income status in a short space of time, thanks to the discovery of diamonds and prudent fiscal management thereafter. Today, it is Ghana, Ethiopia, India, Cote d'Ivoire, Djibouti, Cambodia, Bhutan, Senegal, Tanzania, and the Philippines that are counted as the fastest growing economies in the world by the World Bank. And Botswana no longer features in the top 10. How do we ensure that the country overcomes its challenges and capitalizes on its stellar foundation? Tonight we do a quick review of Botswana's strengths and weaknesses, looking to identify a globally competitive advantage. To help us do that is Stanford University alumni, former educator at the University of Oxford and the Harvard Business School, now Vice Dean for Strategy and Research at the African Leadership University in Rwanda, Catherine Duggan. I know you're not necessarily based in Botswana and you do a lot of work across the continent, but what are your observations regarding Botswana's specific case with an otherwise stellar reputation with regards to fiscal management, rule of law, everything else, but then dismal ratings when it comes to productivity, competitiveness, and even happiness?
I think those two things go together. I think that there's a way in which if you're happy, if you're doing quite well, if you're particularly doing well relative to some of your neighbors, relative to lots of other countries in the world, let alone just on the continent, it's easy to say, we've arrived. And once that happens, then you start saying, who will give me my thing next? And I think what we need to make sure is that the youth in Botswana, especially, that the Botswana youth don't think to themselves, somebody else has done this for me, and now I can reap the rewards. I think that every single person, and particularly every single young person, is responsible for creating a Botswana that works and a Botswana that will really push into the future.
You pointed out that we should bring the youth particularly on board. How do we do this? How do you mobilize and engage the youth to get along on a bigger national vision? Yes, buy into a national vision. Yeah.
The first thing that we have to do is to think about how to make sure that people know that their voices will be heard. Because people won't speak, people won't contribute if they don't think that they'll be heard. And that's actually something that I've been hearing in Botswana quite a bit as I've been here, that a lot of people have things to say, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of expertise, there's a lot of passion, and there's a lot of desire to be a part of this development process and of the process of getting into high income status. But some people feel as though there's been a period when their voices haven't been heard as much as they'd like. And I think that on the one hand, it's good, not just for government, but for corporates, for elders, to make sure that people know that if they speak, that they will be listened to. And it's also so important for those people to speak up, for the youth to speak up, but also for corporates, for elders to speak up, and for everybody to have a dialogue and a conversation about what can be done. So insofar as I think the youth really are the people who are going to drive this forward, I think we need to start listening to their ideas, listening to their passion, and harnessing what they know as soon as possible.
Why the focus on the youth? So it may seem an obvious question, just a buzzword that we keep hearing, but sometimes people need to really understand why this keeps coming up.
Well, there are two reasons to focus on the youth. One of them is that if we believe that the young people of the world, and particularly in Africa and in Botswana, if the young Botswana are the people who are going to do innovation, the people who really understand ICT, the people who are digital natives, and if we think that innovation comes out of those sorts of things, then the youth is where we're going to see innovation for the rest of our lives. And the thing about having such a young population is that it can be a blessing and a curse. So on the one hand, it means that Africa in general, and Botswana in particular, although fortunately having had some policies about really focusing on education and lowering birth rates, there's a manageable youth bulge in this country. But having that youth bulge means that on the one hand, there are lots of people who are really able to contribute, lots of people who are able to innovate, and lots of people who are hungry to make things better in the next 50 years, not just in the next 20 years or however long somebody my age would want to make things better. But secondly, there's the flip side of that youth sort of demographic dividend, which is that youth who feel disempowered, youth who feel as though there's nothing for them, on the one hand, they may leave, which robs the country of its greatest resource, especially if they leave with no plan. If they leave not because they're going abroad to broaden their horizons, but because they feel there's nothing here for them. That's one risk. A second risk is that they don't leave, but they just pull back. And they stop engaging in their companies, they stop engaging in society, they stop engaging in building businesses that would ultimately generate productivity and innovation. And then the third possibility is that they really become so frustrated and so unhappy that it destabilizes society. Botswana, fortunately, has really good institutions, and so I see that as less of a risk here than I might see it in some other places, but it's still always a risk when you have a lot of youth who are unemployed, and particularly who feel as though they're not being seen as the future and they may not have a future. That's really the thing that I think the government and the private sector and everybody in society needs to make sure doesn't happen, to keep the young Botswana engaged as much as possible all the time so that they can feel as though it's their responsibility as well to build this country.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Thank you for staying with us as we continue to speak to Catherine Duggan of the African Leadership University regarding how Botswana can best position itself competitively in the global market. How do we go about not just paying lip service to empowerment and inclusion, but actually empowering and including the youth? Do you have maybe some good case examples or some projects that have proven to be successful?
I think that there's a way in which we talk about inclusion, we talk about diversity, and let me broaden it for a minute and to include not just the youth, but women, minorities, foreigners, people who are not necessarily the sorts of people whom we've always seen sitting in boardrooms and around corporate tables. Once we look at businesses, and this is true for countries as well, but particularly businesses, what we see is the more diversity you have, the more profits you make. And the reason is, in order to make profits, you need to hear from lots of different people, you need to have lots of different viewpoints in the room, and you need to understand risk. And having lots of people from lots of different perspectives helps you to understand risks that you might not otherwise see. So I would say, let's begin at home. Let's begin at home with how we think about raising our children, how we think about raising our children to feel empowered, whether they're boy children or girl children, no matter what language we speak at home, and no matter how old the children are. Let's start there. Let's move out to our friends. Let's move out to our social circles, our churches and otherwise, and then move into the boardrooms and say, let's look around and see what our boardrooms look like and ask, are we losing opportunities to hear voices that could make us profitable? Once we've done that, we can look around individually at the country, at the government, at everything else in the country and say, how do we tap into the full range of the Botswana? How do we tap into the full range of what each Botswana in this country can offer and make sure that we are pulling together all of the resources of the country, not just from a narrow band of resources.
And finally, you have said that the private sector shouldn't just create jobs, but create wealth. Could you please elaborate?
So the thing about the private sector is the more it's allowed to grow, the more it will grow. And as it grows, naturally it creates jobs, but it also creates wealth, it also creates profits, it creates IP wealth, it creates wealth in the form of money, it creates wealth in the form of investments, and it creates wealth in the form of optimism among the youth and among other people that they're going to have jobs. And so if we look narrowly at the private sector just as a way for people to take jobs, and particularly just as a way for people to have jobs outside the government, then we're missing one of the most important roles of the private sector, which is not just to create wealth, but to have a role separate from government and parallel to government, which will allow both the public and the private sector to do what they're best at without trying to do the thing that the other is doing. So we need to have everybody working together as a team, much like a soccer team or a football team, understanding what the other group is doing, understanding what other people are doing, but without trying to dominate everything, without trying to dominate the field, and allowing everybody to excel at the thing at which they really excel. That's the thing that's going to drive Botswana into a productive, high-income future.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome to First Issues, as tonight we hear a strong case made for the insurance industry, one that is not typically as celebrated as other members of the financial services sector, such as banking, the stock market, and others. It's rare to find entire sections of media publications or television shows dedicated to analysis of developments within the insurance sector, or to celebrating leaders within this industry. And you definitely don't get too many young people dreaming of becoming insurance professionals when they grow up. This may be because of a lack of knowledge regarding insurance overall. Apparently, just 3% of Botswana have life insurance policies, which may mean that short-term products such as car and household insurance are faring far worse. Looking to rectify this is the general manager of Khare Insurance Brokers, previously known as First Sun Alliance Insurance Brokers, Walter Matapuri, who says the poor penetration of the sector in Botswana just points to the immense potential of this industry.
Potential benefits are there in many ways. The stakeholders within the economy, starting with government, the individuals themselves, Botswana, and other service providers tend to grow as the insurance industry grows. Particularly for government, if people can learn to insure and be self-reliant as they grow older, it means the responsibility to carry the burden in terms of social welfare reduces. And we're quite sure the government needs this relief. So insurance is one of the many ways that will bring a reprieve. But at the same time, the individual who cares to take insurance will live a much better life in that they'll be able to mobilize their own resources, use them in the manner they see fit or they have planned without having to wait for timeous payments from government. But in addition, when the insurance industry grows, the benefits will spread to all the sectors of the economy. We know banks are there for depositing money. Insurance is one active industry that mobilizes resources from the people, and that money ends up with banks. And when the money is with banks, it is then available to support economic development of projects in Botswana. So any thriving economy cannot thrive without insurance playing a part.
In light of the positive gains or the possible gains that could stem from the development of this industry, what then can be done to stimulate or accelerate growth of the insurance industry?
There are so many things that can be done to promote the growth of the industry. First of all, the growth starts within the industry itself. It has to place itself on a position where it is relevant to be able to cover as many people as possible and as many businesses as possible. So capital growth comes through writing more business. And this talks to these insurance companies investing more resources to be able to reach out to all the people who are in need of insurance. It also talks to product development, where more relevant products are introduced into the market and people find a reason to buy those products from a need basis. But outside the industry, there is obviously the need of an enabling regulatory framework which allows these insurers or insurance players to be innovative. There is also need for direct support, where I think we are advocating a policy where the government plays a direct role to incentivize, to promote growth and development of this sector through empowering locals. This is a faster way of making sure that they are more structured and relevant investments. Empowering locals comes through making sure that insurance requirements in Botswana do not necessarily end up in the hands of foreign interest without exhausting the local capacity. In other words, we are saying let's strengthen Botswana initiatives into this industry. Let's strengthen institutions that are there in place in terms of building the capacity to take these risks. You may be aware that a lot of what gets insured locally ends up in other markets. And this is the capacity which we would like to encourage to be built so that less is reinsured, as the word is reinsured outside, and more risk is retained locally, and therefore more premium is retained locally to promote the industry further and also to boost the economy.
You've said that for the industry to grow, the products available to consumers need to be relevant to their needs. How is this done? Is there room for growth and innovation? Are there green fields in the insurance industry?
Yes, a lot of them, particularly for Botswana. You will note that even in the region, we lag behind in terms of certain products that are available to our consumers locally, as are available, for example, in South Africa and other markets. So there is opportunity for innovative service providers to bring products to cover those extra risks that are up to now not catered for. It doesn't only talk about new products, but it talks about existing products, reinforcing them to provide more benefits or to provide wider extents of cover. We see a definite need in the area of personal insurance. For example, we need products that cater for different classes of people within our society. You find in this day insurers still talk about we don't cover certain farms because the conditions are not enabling. But if somebody has put something into that farm where they stand to make financial loss, our argument is there must be a product to cater for that risk within its context. There are areas where I think of late people are saying for us to go to a doctor, we need to raise enough money for the co-payment. Where are insurers? If clients have to wait for a long time to get a co-payment to be able to get treatment, what is happening to their health? So there should be a product that intervenes to provide that co-payment, where the client insures for that co-payment and then they get timely medical attention. The area of funeral assurance gives an opportunity for insurers. We still have limited benefits locally, and our products are not as exhaustive as they should be. So that is an area of opportunity where local service providers can grow their business. Another area is also an area of reinsurance. We alluded to the fact that in the insurance service provision chain, there's brokers, there's underwriters, as in insurers, then there are reinsurers. Between the underwriter and the reinsurer, someone can play a role there as a reinsurance broker. So these are services and products that need to come into the local market in order to promote its growth, rather than relying on external products, for example, or on external service providers to come and play these roles locally.
Welcome back to First Issues Own Your Day, Own Your Life segment. Professor Kiran Bhagat has, hopefully over several episodes, made you, our viewers, appreciate both the physical and the financial cost of obesity. There are several legitimate reasons why one should lose weight. Yet even the most educated, the most mature, the most disciplined amongst us struggle to do so. Where are parents meant to even begin when it comes to managing their children's weight? The professor has some key words of advice.
I think the scourge of obesity can be fought and won by consistency. Consistency in the way you eat, understanding nutrition. You know, we as doctors also are very poor. You know, in the days when I went to medical school, nutrition probably had 1 or 2 hours of our entire career devoted to nutrition. So doctors are terrible at nutrition. We need to understand better what we're putting on our plate. Food is medicine. Dijo momo. If you eat right, it is better than anything you can do. And so if we know the foods that are good for us, if we know what the food industry is doing in conniving towards convincing us that their foods are healthy, we will avoid some of the things that we're doing. For example, we've talked about in the past, we talked about fruit juice being as poisonous as Coca-Cola and Fanta. It's got as much sugar in there. Some of the smoothies that are sold in the supermarket are as toxic and poisonous as Coca-Cola is. So if our public are more engaged and educated, if we have a Consumer Council watchdog that is able to monitor what the food industry does, as in many other parts of the world, we're able to clamp down on the surreptitious and cunning nature in which the food industry actually convinces our public, who are not often educated about what they're doing, and convincing them that they're eating healthy. That, I think, is the first process by which we are able to perhaps convince people.
This program was brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?